Hello everyone, welcome to CPHR Talks, brought to you by CPHR Alberta. I'm Nicole Bourgeois and I'm a specialist with stakeholder and community engagement with CPHR Alberta, and I'm going to be your host for today. We're going to dive into everything HR on these podcasts, trends, burnout, leadership, or just a few things that are going to come up in our upcoming podcasts. And you'll be able to access these sessions and other CPHR Alberta podcasts on our YouTube channel. We are recording our podcast right now from the CPHR Alberta Conference 2025, where we're going to be bringing you some of those experts and speakers who have filled our rooms at the conference. And I want to introduce right now a couple individuals. We're going to be talking along the lines of neuroinclusion and neurodiversity. We're going to define what neuroinclusion is, talk about the impact into our workplaces as we're finally showing courage to have these conversations, not just with our leadership, but actually having them with our employees, for our employees, and with our employees. So to my right, we have Svetlana Miftahov Rapport, who's an HR instructor and researcher with Bow Valley College and a CPHR designate. And to her right, we have Emma Duffy, Workforce Solutions lead, who is with the CNEV Foundation and with NEUROinclusive Workforce Solutions. So welcome both of you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. So let's start off because I feel like neuroinclusion or neurodiversity needs to be defined.
That's where we always like to start our conversations, is around the language. What do these different terms mean, and what does it look like once we actually start talking about it? So when we chat about neurodiversity, it really is just a different way that everyone thinks about things. So the common example we use in our presentations, if I tell everyone to think about the sky, we're all going to think about it a different way. We're all going to maybe, see a bright sky. Some might see a cloudy sky. Some might be looking through a window out at a sky. We're all going to think a different way about that prompt, and that's simply what neurodiversity is the way that we all think about and act on information in a different way. So at CNEV, we say everyone is neurodiverse. We're all thinking and have different ways that we approach information and the things we're doing at work. And then neuroinclusion in the workplace is really about how do we create those environments in our workspaces, how we interact with colleagues that value the diverse ways that we all think and act on information. So really coming from a strength-based approach, how do we support everyone in the workplace on the different ways that they might approach a task or a situation or think about information. So it's really just about making those workplaces as inclusive as possible and being open to different ways of working with people.
Fantastic. So it's how everybody sees something, the perception, or how we manage ourselves through that lens, right?
Yeah.
For sure. Svetlana, can you expand a little bit? I know you've done some research, and I think employers are like, well, what's under that umbrella, right? Can you share a little bit about that?
Definitely, and Emma pretty much covered it all, that when we talk about neurodiversity, it's the way we communicate and interact with the world, and we do it in so many different ways. Now, neurodiversity, it's also a spectrum, so it's not just this one category or a box where we can say that's the type of people who are neurodivergent. There are so many different layers to that also, if we have time in this conversation, maybe we will unpack a little bit. Mm-hmm. But the simplified definition, I would say, is the way we focus, the way we communicate, the way we process information. And of course, it translates big time into the workplace, because today the question is, it's not, do we have neurodiverse people in our workplace? It's, we do have them, and this is what the research, the data says. Mm-hmm. But how do we create workplaces that actually work for all kinds of minds? And this is when it actually becomes so interesting.
Absolutely. So Svetlana did a micro session at our conference and has done some work with CPHR Alberta around an HR toolkit for neuroinclusion. Can you just give us some statistics? Because I think as employers or HR professionals, when they're talking to their leadership, the numbers talk, right? The numbers matter. And then Emma, we're going to start talking a little bit more about strategy, the business strategy and the workplace strategy. But can you give us some numbers from your research to kind of put it in perspective of how many, or because everybody, as your point, is neurodiverse, because we perceive things differently. But if for those hard stats, how many in our
Definitely.
workplaces?
Yeah, so there is some available data, like kind of worldwide data that is available for everyone, and the numbers show that 1 in 5 people in adult population are neurodivergent. And here we talk about people who have been diagnosed, who have all of those, specifics of either having ADHD or on the autistic spectrum or dyslexia, and there are additional diagnoses as well. So 1 in 5. And this is why when you look around you, it could be person sitting beside you, it could be yourself. So these numbers are pretty strong. Then there are some numbers that also show sad side of it, that 30 to 40% of neurodivergent individuals, they are unemployed because the workplaces, for the most part, they are not built for neurodivergent individuals. But organizations who actually do hire neurodivergent individuals give us a lot of hope, because they show that once you hire them, the retention is 90%.
Wow.
And 90% is huge. It's, that's the loyalty, that's the commitment. And so many organizations are missing out on those very, very talented individuals. And then when we did our research, so we dived a little bit deeper into, we wanted to see two voices, what HR professionals would say and neurodivergent employees and individuals would say. At this point, it was a very first phase, so it was mostly kind of, I would say, Alberta-based research, and the members of CPHR community, these are the HR professionals we talk to. And through this research, we have discovered so many gaps.
Right.
And I would say the biggest one was that the awareness is definitely there. HR professionals are aware about neurodiversity. They want to get into this space, but they don't necessarily know what to do and where to start.
Right.
And this is where the idea of the toolkit came into life.
Fantastic, fantastic. And Emma, can you kind of dive a little bit into maybe some of the challenges that individuals who are under that neurodivergent umbrella perhaps experience, maybe finding employment, and then we can talk a bit about being in employment, because that's part of that service provider perspective, and some of the work that Sneeve does and NEUROinclusive Workforce does. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so when we're kind of chatting about that workspace and maybe neurodivergent individuals coming into it, the biggest barrier that we tend to see or hear about from individuals is just a lack of understanding from an organization. Maybe they've never heard the word neurodiversity or neuroinclusion. Like, it's still
Right.
kind of a new topic that's coming up, and workplaces most of the time when we're chatting with companies are like, oh, we've kind of touched on it, but we don't really know what to do or too much about it. So a lot of the times we find it's just there's not the education there, and there's a bit of a fear of, well, oh, it's going to be too much work, and so we're just not going to even address the topic, and we're just going to kind of push it to the side, which really isn't the case. We find a lot of the things we provide of strategies are either low cost or have no cost at all, and most of the time it's just having that education and awareness around what, the different way people work, and just adjusting communication and adding some structure and things like that.
Right.
So we find, it's just that lack of understanding in an organization of someone who may be neurodivergent coming in, and that's maybe creating some of the barriers for an individual to really thrive in the organization. So it's really about building that initial understanding of acceptance and understanding, just being open to the conversation, and not having organizations be like, oh, I don't want to go there yet.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit nervous. What if I say the wrong thing?
Or I tried this before and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you hired someone blonde one day and they didn't work out either, right?
Exactly.
So making sure that it's individualistic and not grouping them together. And were you finding that same research in your research, that same feedback from HR professionals that you were working with in
Definitely,
yeah?
definitely. And as Emma was talking about it, I was, yes, exactly. So that, I believe, is the biggest fear. It's, we are afraid of things that we don't know. And there is a lot of uncertainty around this particular topic, not because HR professionals don't want to do the right thing. It's because, as you have mentioned, there is this fear. They don't want necessarily to do something they're not an expert. And then what we found with the HR people is very, very often they would say, well, but how do we know? How do we know that somebody is neurodivergent if people don't necessarily disclose? And this is where we came up with this approach that, well, neuroinclusion doesn't necessarily need to have a disclosure.
Right.
Because
Right.
this type of approach of solve to one, extend to many. And as Emma was talking about, those little fixes is that those adjustments, those new strategies or approaches or processes that we create in the workplace, they will benefit everybody, but specifically neurodivergent employees. So it's kind of a win-win situation because there is nothing to lose. And then to those HR professionals who actually feel that I'm fearful, that I don't know about this topic, I might not ask the right questions, or I do something wrong, it's not that we need to diagnose. We just need to have this willingness, willingness to help, willingness to be flexible, and to ask questions, because things might work in so many different ways.
Exactly. And Emma was shaking her head, yes, especially when you talked about the diagnosis part, because I think as HR professionals or even employers, we're like, you know what, that person isn't like Emma, and she's not, or he's not like Svetlana, and you know what, I'm not sure what to do, right? But I am afraid to ask. Emma, any suggestions about if you're identifying, because it is a duty to inquire in certain circumstances, right? What would you suggest? Because I think it's that universal design that we're looking for. But what would you tell an employer or an HR professional if they're suspecting or they're just not sure? How would they ask, or how would they approach that individual to do some discovery so that they can be included better in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of ties back to what Svetlana was saying. Like, we don't necessarily always need to know what the diagnosis is, and we don't need a disclosure to be able to support. Of course, there's always an internal organization's HR policies and procedures, but from the way we approach it, it really is, asking the questions and trying to work with the individual of where they might need support. If you are starting to notice, maybe some things are not going so well, or some areas may need more of a focus. And so instead of, trying to be like, oh, well, I think you have autism, or I think you have ADHD, we kind of want to avoid that.
Right.
And we want to just kind of have that open conversation of, define what it is they might be struggling with. So, hey, this task wasn't getting done. There's some, maybe some time blindness around how you're working on these tasks and it's taking a while. What can we do to support? Here are some accommodations we typically offer, whether it's, some different online planners you can have and schedulers and things like that. Start to talk about tools and resources that are available for the specific thing that might be a struggle in the workplace, and work with the individual to kind of build what will work for them and kind of go from there. So it's more about approaching it from, how can we just support that individual and what might be needing that focus on at the time.
For sure. So like a scheduler for time commitments,
Yes.
or perhaps it's noise canceling headphones in a noisy office, right?
Exactly.
We actually have, it's escaping
Sensory
me,
room.
the sensory room, thank you. That here available at the conference, where people who are feeling overstimulated or just overwhelmed, or perhaps need to just take a step back, and that's also for individuals, introverts, however you want to label it.
It's a quiet room.
Exactly, where you can just, take a step back, take a step for yourself. And we've equipped it with, Emma has been really great in advising us with some weighted blankets. And what else do we have in there, Emma?
So I mean, it's really, the space is just intentional to have a quiet space where people can go to kind of reset after the busyness of conferences. There's lots of people talking. It can get loud, and really bright environments as well. And so in there, we have the weighted blankets and kind of different things in there. We have some focus tools, so if people just need something to have in their hands, especially as they're sitting through the conference, and in a lot of sessions it's a lot of paying attention. So we have some of those. We have some earplugs, if people are just needing a little bit of reduced noise to help them stay focused. And then we also just have some coloring items in there as well. That can be a really soothing process to go through. And again, really just having that quiet space so people can take a moment and be able to reset and go back out and enjoy the conference.
And you know, Nicole, it's such a beautiful example how you actually walk the talk here at CPHR during the conference, because as Emma was talking about all of those tools that organizations might provide, and I would suggest to HR professionals when it comes to those accommodations and how do we ask those questions or should we ask those questions, we focus not necessarily on disability or on the difference. We focus on removing barriers. And the moment we start kind of restructuring this in our heads as HR professionals who build those policies and practices, that we focus on removing barriers, then it becomes, I wouldn't say easy, but easier, because we remove this personal component from the picture that, oh, this person is like that and this person is like this. I create a toolbox, and this toolbox is available for everybody.
Right.
So if you come and get a tool from this toolbox, it doesn't mean that something's wrong with you or you are different or you need special approach. Anybody could benefit. And this sensory room, so the tools Emma has mentioned, it's not a big deal. It's not a huge budget that you would create something like that. And it makes such a huge difference for neurodivergent people and employees. But then any person could come and enjoy from the weighted blanket, from the earplugs, having those little things to kind of play with during long focus processes. So again, it's a win-win solution for your organization.
Absolutely, and a small accommodation, even as an employee, bringing it into your workplace and, you know, being very open. I use, you know, I like to just fiddle with something and it just keeps me focused, but it's a really intentional tool that I'm using. You know, or just a lap blanket that kind of just keeps you grounded. Those are things that are applicable in the workplace that aren't big flags, right?
Yeah.
For individuals so that they can maintain their privacy. I think that's a lot of what individuals are scared of in the workplace, is maintaining that privacy and that confidentiality as well, not being labeled, because we're so good at labeling. You know, and I think that's part of the fear of that disclosure, and ensuring that people are accepting without that label. Svetlana, can you talk a little bit more, because we're talking about tools in the workplace, and that's what that sensory room was really also to identify, that it can be the simplest thing, a live plant on your desk, right? And again, Emma was such a great support in putting that together in the CNE Foundation and NEUROinclusive Workforce. It was just such a great opportunity to identify and exemplify it. What about the toolkit itself? Like, are there, let's kind of delve it a little bit in. Like, are there templates in there? Are there conversations? Yes, exactly. Because I bet you there's some conversation starters, because I know we'll jump to Emma after and talk about some of maybe those conversations that have happened, and, you know, what to do, what to not to do. So,
Yeah, oh gosh, how much time do we have to talk about it?
Well, we'll have to stop fairly soon, because we got to make sure Emma gets to her session.
I'll try to summarize it, but anybody who is listening, maybe we can link the toolkit below.
We will link some toolkits below after,
Okay,
Yeah.
so when we were building this toolkit, we actually were thinking about, okay, HR professionals said they all want it. They want to do something. The awareness is there. The intentions are there. So how do we take those intentions into, very good intentions for inclusivity, into real actions? And this is when we looked at all the possible processes and practices within the organizations, and we said, okay, from the HR perspective, you are change makers. So you create all of those strategies, policies, practices, but you cannot do it on your own. If you don't have leadership buy-in, for example, no matter what you do, it's not gonna work, right? Because you would have so many obstacles on the way. So we said, we're gonna start from this huge, a strong foundation of how do we get buy-in? How do we get buy-in from our leadership team? How do we get buy-in with all the management within the organizations? Right. Because they have to be on board. Managers are the ones who are supporting their employees. And this is where we started. So we kind of split this toolkit into three main categories.
Okay.
So it's the getting buy-in, creating awareness, and then updating HR policies and practices. Try to make it as practical as possible. So if you dive into this toolkit, you will find templates for everything, for emails to your leadership team, emails to your management, conversation starters, conversations that managers could have with their employees. anything you could think of, everything that HR professionals mentioned throughout this research process. And then we also said, okay, so now when we as HR want to create policies and practices, actionable things for neuroinclusion in the organizations, what are those things going to be? And we took the entire employee life cycle into consideration. So we said it's not just the adjustments and accommodations that you offer when you have these people on board. How do you bring them on board? How you actually made them interested in applying for this job? Because barriers for neurodivergent people, they start from the moment of job application, from the moment how the job description is written. And there are those barriers within this description that they won't even apply for a job. So we took it from the very, very initial step, the entire employee life cycle, from the job application to the onboarding process, to how we accommodate while you're with us, how we help you to get promoted, so on and so forth. So check out the toolkit. There are templates for everything. And the message that I want to leave here is that you don't have to do all of that, because sometimes it might feel overwhelming that all of the processes I need to change right now, and that's how it's going to work. Start with something. Pick one thing that is doable. I know that HR people are very, very busy, so start with something little and step by step.
Fantastic.
It's not all or nothing approach.
Wow, so 3-part toolkit with all of the templates, conversation starters. Emma, what would be your advice to for employers or even individuals who are in that job search mode to maybe even reference that toolkit? I think if it's common knowledge for everybody, it becomes common practice, right? What is your advice?
Yeah, and it's great to hear, and the toolkit's an awesome way to share that, or even just like having those email templates. It's like, how easy is it, right?
Yeah.
Like you can take it and go with it there. So it's, really easy for people to access and be able to start to implement. And again, just starting with 1 or 2 points and then building from there, right? It's just having that initial intention to go through. So yeah, definitely a great resource. And then also through the Cine Family Foundation and our service, NEUROinclusive Workforce Solutions, we work directly with employers on providing education, whether it be presentations or workshops with the organizations on, what is neurodiversity. We start at kind of that initial phase to build some awareness. Maybe they already have that in the team, and we can go a little bit deeper in our conversations and provide some more general strategies all the way up to kind of the employee life cycle, and going through each of those stages as well. And then we also offer HR consultation from a neuro-inclusive lens. So if companies are wanting review of, maybe it is their job postings, that is such a common one of, we see things all the time, and for neurodivergent individuals, sometimes there's that literal thinking aspect. And one of the ones I see more often now that I've picked up on it is, a job posting say, we want someone who's a bridge builder. Now, are they literally building bridges in that job? Probably not. But there's the literal aspect to it. And so it's even just having that review of job postings, your maybe accommodation policy and procedure. We can come in and take a review and give some recommendations from there, and really give you some tangible things to take away. And that's all at no cost to Canadian employers. So really, it is as simple as just kind of reaching out, starting the questions, accessing toolkits, accessing different resources. There's lots out there to start that conversation and to start implementing it in the workplace.
Fantastic. And then having a place to go to talk about it, right, in a safe place. Because we know as HR professionals, who do I talk to? Right? How do I share and feel and get advice from, right? You have the toolkit, and now we work together to utilize it.
And thinking of awareness, I think Emma in their company, they do an exceptional job at actually helping to build this awareness. And we did have them presenting at Bow Valley College as well. For a group of people. So there is no reason why organizations wouldn't do that. And HR professionals, they don't have to do it alone, because they have people like Emma who actually have the skill, the knowledge, and they can come and help companies start building the awareness. And you guys do a phenomenal job. I believe it's so kind of simplified approach of something that to so many people feels so complicated, so they don't even want to touch it. And then the moment you bring the experts into the room, you understand, well, I definitely can see myself in it. I definitely can be a part of it. So I highly recommend to have Emma actually coming to your organization and helping you build this awareness.
so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the HR toolkit starts with helping to take the guesswork out, and then organizations like the Cine Family Foundation and the NEUROinclusive Workforce Solutions helps you put it into practical knowledge, gives you a starting point to be able to talk with your employees, talk with your leadership, starting those conversations in a safe and valuable manner, to make our workplaces fun for everybody, make them inclusive for everybody. Accessibility should be universal, whether it is for someone who's neurodivergent or someone who uses a wheelchair. Accessibility for all, and I think that universal design is part of that as well. Svetlana, I want to thank you, and Emma, I want to thank you both for joining me today. All the background noise you hear is, of course, all the goings on at our conference where we're broadcasting from today. But again, thank you for your work on the research and the HR toolkit for neuroinclusion. Emma, your work with individuals and organizations to bring home the inclusiveness in their organizations and around neuro-inclusiveness. So I want to thank you both for being with us today. Truly appreciate your time.